Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Ask GameSpot, the show where you brave and we default. What does that mean exactly? I'm not sure, but luckily Peter Brown's here to tell us all about a little game called Bravely Default. Our first question comes via Facebook from Andres, who wants to know, Peter, why does this game feel more Final Fantasy-ish than all the other Final Fantasies combined?
Maybe you remember Final Fantasy games of old, right? Where you had wizards, you had warriors, although they were called mages and knights. And well, so lately Final Fantasy games have been set in some weird futurescapes, and it's not really the way it used to be. Bravely Default goes back to that mix of medieval times and a little bit of the Renaissance thrown in. You know, it just kind of captures that fantasy feel.
Yeah, I noticed during the demo there wasn't one like super emo protagonist, and I didn't go through one futuristic motorcycle battle.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's got a lot of other things in it too, like terminology like Phoenix Down, the names that they use for spells. It's, apart from the title, basically a Final Fantasy game. And the guys who have made it were also the guys who worked on the 4 Heroes of Light on the DS.
Okay.
And it's basically a spiritual successor to that game.
Christopher on Facebook wants to know, is the grinding in this game going to be super boring like it is in most JRPGs?
Grinding is inherently boring, a little bit.
Just a little.
But Bravely Default has a few settings that help speed up the process. You can change the encounter rate, so when you're running around the world map, you'll run into enemies more frequently or less frequently, depending on what you're trying to do. You can also speed up the battle animations as well, up to 4 times standard speed. So that way you can get through a battle in just a couple of seconds, where before it would have taken maybe 30 seconds or a whole minute.
The game also has these bonus objectives that it'll give you, like if you complete a battle in 1 round or don't take any damage, that'll also give you some extra experience or JP points.
Yeah.
So that's just a little extra incentive to keep those random battles feeling interesting. All right, so Morris on Facebook wants to know, are we getting the original version of Bravely Default or this slightly easier version that he's heard some rumors about?
He sounds a little confused, but he's kind of on the right path. There are 2 versions of Bravely Default. In Japan, there was the first one called Bravely Default Flying Fairy, which is the title of our game, but our game is based on Bravely Default for the sequel. For the sequel, incorporated fan feedback to help shape the game for future titles in the series. That's the version of the game we got, even though the subtitle is Flying Fairy. But it's not necessarily easier, although if you find yourself in a particularly challenging battle, you do have the option to lower the difficulty.
Crystal McGee via Twitter wants to know, is there going to be an option for having Japanese subtitles and English voices? Or vice versa? I probably said that backwards.
No, actually, no, but you're right though.
Okay.
Yeah, you have the option of having Japanese voices, English subtitles, or Japanese subtitles. I don't know why you would want the Japanese subs.
Well,
but I think the takeaway here is that a lot of people...
If you're trying to, teach yourself, you get a word lines up with an image, because the English and Japanese sentence structures are exactly the same. That's just obvious.
Anyway, people who like Japanese RPGs often prefer the Japanese audio track for very different reasons. But if that's what you want, you have the option to do that in Bravely Default.
Stupendous Man on Twitter, and I feel like that's not your real name, but he wants to know, is the story in Bravely Default going to be any good? Or is it just typical JRPG nonsense?
I can't make the call if it's going to be good or not, but it is very reminiscent of older Final Fantasy games. There are 4 young heroes. They're
going to go on a mystical quest.
There are crystals that they have to somehow save to save the world. It's not a really interesting, brand new story, but the characters themselves aren't that bad from what I've played. And for me, it's really about the gameplay and the world. The story is secondary. I know that's not always the case with RPGs for a lot of people, but for me, it is, and I don't know, I think Bravely Default is just fine the way it is.
The darkness overflows!
All right, folks, thanks again for watching another episode of Ask GameSpot. If you want to know more about Bravely Default, our UK team recently finished up a review for the international version of the game. Otherwise, if you want to get your hands on the game itself, Peter, when's it coming out?
February 7th.
All right, well, thanks again for coming and sharing your Bravely Default knowledge with the folks at home.
It was a pleasure.